Showtime. Prime ourselves. Showtime. Snap your fingers. Clap your hands. Hit your
Mindset. We'll go. We'll I don't even know what the hell I'm going to say. We're gonna
Today we'll be
I'm looking at the
discussing-
picture of this woman's head, waiting for Bola Long to ask me, how the hell did this woman's severed head get in the middle of your shot today?
Well, when you don't have a mindset, that's what you look like.
Yes, that's it. We're going to have a very interesting show today because we're talking about mindset. It came up because our guest wasn't here, and Bambo said, I want to talk about mindset. So we are going to, for the hour, discuss mindset on
A Wonderful
Chaos. But up. Bambos Charles Demetriou.
Andy Shalef Mazalo.
You know my middle name is Raymond.
Jesus.
If you want to if I do Bambos Charles Demetriou, you could do Andrew Raymond Shalef.
Andrew Raymond Shalef.
Yes. Raymond was my grandfather's name on my mom's side.
Okay.
I don't know if I ever met him, actually. Maybe I was there for a year.
Shut up, Raymond. Mindset.
It's funny because when you said, let's do this subject, I thought to myself, isn't that the only subject we ever do on this show?
You see, Bulang already commented.
Of course he did.
That's what happens to people when they watch these kind of shows.
Yes. We slice their heads off, serve it back to them. I have often thought that mindset is, I would say, one of the things that I can pick up in a person very quickly, which kind of lets me tell a lot about their lives. And one of the mindsets that I know that I've triggered, I've mentioned on the show before, is if like someone has a mindset that there's good and bad people.
Yeah.
Now, if they think there's good and bad people, then I would say, oh my God, if they believe there's good and bad people, then I already know a lot about them without them saying anything. As opposed to there's people that do bad things, or there's just good people that sometimes do bad things. Like that's a different perspective.
Nice.
But I don't even know if that's the way you would see mindset. But I often see mindset as, I use the word priming a lot, and I use priming for different things. Before I do a training, I often think about how do I prime a person's brain so that by the time they've come in the door, they're already ready to jump into the material, and I don't have to spend a half a day getting them ready. That's a word that I use, priming. And I also would say that's creating a certain mindset.
Yeah.
I also see it on shows like yesterday's show. Was it yesterday's show we had Erica Lynn on?
2 days ago.
2 days ago, when she said, when she speaks to her father or her mother in this case, and says to her mother, you know, Mom, that language is just not going to be spoken with me. For me, that's a mindset which she's established for herself, and in establishing it for herself and setting what she call a boundary or a vision for how she'd like to see it, the mother now has to shift her mindset or not. And so there's a way I see mindset is, how do I establish my way of seeing the world? And by seeing it that way, certain things happen and other things don't. And that's why when a person makes the same mistake over and over and over again, and they blame the world around them, then I'd say, well, basically the one thing consistent in that over and over again is you. So how do we then look at maybe something you do, and that'll often be be connected to a mindset. So that's been my take on mindset. And what's your take on it?
Can I quickly ask one question?
Yeah.
When you say you could tell, like someone that kind of projects good and bad.
Yeah, on people.
Yeah. Like if you say fuck and someone says, oh, that don't say that word. That's a bad word.
They could say that different ways. But yes.
If they say it in that way, like I'm feeling judged.
Yeah.
But what is their mindset? Like they have a very clear belief, I would say.
I mean, I was going to say, we're moving away only from mindset right now, but mindset wouldn't be separated from this. We could do a modeling. There's that simple model that I've always shown you, which is that there's a behavior.
Yeah.
Anyone who's watching, I'm sure they know who developed this model. You can write it in. There's a behavior, and the behavior is a byproduct of an emotion. And the emotion comes from a thought, and the thought comes from beliefs that we have. And so we have certain beliefs, and then you say, fuck you, motherfucker. And then I don't have an issue, but somebody else has a belief that that's rude and improper.
Yeah.
So the thought they have is that is bad. And then that's bad triggers an emotion like you're a jerk, or I don't like you, or I feel strongly against you. And then the behavior is I speak and you feel there's something that's behind my words. Like, hey, I'm feeling like you're judging me.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a model. Just we're using a simple model. There's hundreds of them, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use this for the moment. That's a model which says a belief establishes a behavior. So if you look at a person's behavior, I've always thought it's amazing how easy it is to see their real beliefs, which are so hidden that you'd think that's impossible to see those, but it isn't. Because people show themselves through their behavior.
Nice. Okay.
And that was, that's sort of been
I remember that.
The diagram.
Yeah.
And so in the mindset for me would be sometimes going from, we're going to do the model again. We're going to say there's the behavior, there's the emotion, there are the thoughts, and then there's the belief. And I would say the mindset for me is often engaging the belief section. Like, what's my mindset? Is the world inherently good? Is the world inherently bad? Are people inherently good that do bad things or not?
Beautiful.
And what I noticed is if I say that people are inherently good, but they do bad things, then what happens is when my behavior starts to become more compassionate, because I say, wow, what is the reason why they would do that? Because I know they're a good person, as opposed to he's a jerk, which is often what happens.
So one is actually like pushing and putting them in a kind of container. They don't have a chance to get out.
Exactly.
And the latter is more spacious. There's space to engage and explore.
Exactly. And that's how I've just chosen to live. And I see that the outcome is that I have less trouble engaging the world, engaging people with different ideas than I have, knowing when I don't want to engage them because there's nothing that I have to gain from it.
Nice. Do you know why I'm smiling?
Why is that?
Because before we started, I said, for me, mindset is living an intentional life.
Yeah.
And then I saw we had 7 views, and I want to be very intentional.
Very intentional.
So my mindset, you kind of said interesting that it's a discipline, but you can have discipline without having an intention behind it.
No. I don't see mindset necessarily as discipline. In your life, I would say, as I've heard you describe it to me, I've seen you describe mindset as discipline, which it also is or can be. But for me, mindset doesn't need to be necessarily discipline. Yeah.
Well, you can be disciplined without intention.
Yeah, sure.
So for me, intention is more the foundation, and the discipline is a kind of byproduct.
Well, like, if I can try to, what I hear you saying is that I can set an intention in the world, and then I can choose whether to be disciplined around it or not.
Yeah.
I might have the intention to lose 10 pounds, but I have no discipline to make that happen. Yeah. But how does that go back to mindset now? So help me understand, because you brought those concepts in, but I still don't see the connection.
So for me, mindset would be wanting to achieve a certain feeling in my life or a certain groundedness. And I might need you to support me in finding the right words, but because I've never really articulated it. But it's knowing that I want to create a strong enough foundation in myself to be able to navigate whatever life might be happening around me, right?
Interesting. So, I'm having my brain is having to do somersaults now because I have to dismiss everything I associate with mindset. My definition of mindset, because when you describe what you're describing, I don't connect it to what I associate with my own around mindset. So I have to really adjust almost my whole way of seeing it. When you talk about mindset, I always hear in my head discipline. Like, how do I create and make sure to create the world or the foundation I want? And then I would say, in my own sense, how do I make sure that my way of thinking is always in line with where I want to be?
Yeah.
And that would be my mindset. But that doesn't need to be associated with discipline necessarily. Again, you have to use that word. And I say necessarily because maybe for some people, they really need to discipline themselves because it's like an addiction. I see that person and I say, that person's an asshole. And then that's the addictive pattern to judge. And then, so the thing that, one would do if they were doing any work is they would slow down and say, hold on, what is it that I'm judging in them? Where do I judge that in myself? And what if I love that part of me? I could also love that part of them. So that would be them doing the work, let's say.
Yeah.
And that would just be a mindset. Now, if the mindset comes to you implicitly, as soon as I judge someone, I'm going to laugh and say, oh shit, what is it about them that I don't want to accept in myself? That's my mindset. But let's say, for example, that doesn't come naturally to you. There is some degree of discipline involved to say, oh, hold on, there's a pattern. I don't want to fall into the old pattern. So I need to have the discipline of not doing that. So that's why I see that it's not that they're not the same. It's more like, Andy, how do I not fall in the old pattern?
Well, the thing that I would do then to train that mindset is meditation.
Yeah.
Meditation and prayer, actually. Or meditation and gratitude are the two things that I put into play. Fixed mindset for people who don't want to change.
Yeah, Bolalang says there's a phrase, fixed mindset, for people who don't want to change or grow, which would be connected to a growth mindset, which is another term often used in self-development books. Do you have a growth mindset? There's a whole definition for that.
Never heard of it.
Growth mindset would be the kind of thing where it's you don't resist the thought of another person per se, and then you hold true to what you also know. It's a bit of a paradox theory in my way of describing it.
So you kind of, whatever the other person brings, your mind might have 100 arguments why that wouldn't be true.
Exactly.
But you allow yourself to take their truth in,
and see how it reshapes or forms your own idea of how things could be.
But that's the way you have also been mentoring me.
Of course.
Yeah.
But so that would mean that I don't have a fixed mindset in a line, or I would have more of a growth mindset. But the whole thing is that the growth or the fixed mindset is we've moved from mindset in general to something more specific.
Yeah.
And the idea being, if you have a fixed mindset or you have a growth mindset, that is maybe a good or a bad thing. And we can go down that path as well for this show, but I'd like it to look at mindset as just, if you prime your brain to respond to stimulus in different ways, you will change the way you see and experience the world. It was no different than when I said on the show, when Case, my mentor, asked me about my dad, and he said, why did your dad treat you so poorly for all those years? I said, because he loved me. So in saying because he loved me, I switched my mindset from he's a horrible individual to he was an incapable individual.
So when I hear you speak, I need to actually so mindset for me would have been what all those motivational speakers talk about normally. Like, you need to do this and that
Have you ever read The Millionaire Mind?
No.
T. Harv Eker?
No. But what I'm getting at is you're redefining for me what mindset is, and when you speak about the mindset, it feels more in alignment because I feel it in my body. And when I used to watch those motivational programs, I had to really think. Because it involved me having to do several steps, for example.
T. Harv Eker says you're supposed to put both your hands on your on your temples and say, I am a millionaire. I have a millionaire mind. I have a millionaire mind. I have a millionaire mind.
Is it working for you?
Something like that. It does kind of work, actually.
Oh, in a way, you are a millionaire.
But I mean, the feeling or sensation that comes over you is the setting of a mindset. So
priming your brain pretty much is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Mindset is priming your brain.
And some people will have primed it so much that it becomes their way of being. Yeah. I always like I got into it a few times, but I never go deep enough into it because I just don't see it serves me so much, is the integral theory. It's a very complex system that maps out different levels of consciousness. But the one thing I took away, which was a very simplified version of it, was that there's a state experience, right? An experience that one has as a state, maybe lasts a day, maybe an hour, maybe a few minutes. And then there's just a experience as if it's just, you are that permanently. Yeah. So you might have that experience once in your life and then regress to another experience, but then you might have that as a constant experience as you get older. And then that would be, how do you prime the mindset you prefer to have? How would you prime that? And a lot of different coaches and trainers have different ways of doing that. And that's probably what you've been experiencing. We're talking about the meta level understanding here. How you achieve it is different. A lot of people do, what do you call the work when you look in a mirror and you speak to yourself? You know that? There's a term for it.
Yeah, I know it, but so what's the intention of that, by the way?
The intention is to build a different self-image. For instance, you are attractive.
Affirmations.
Affirmations. Thank you. You are beautiful. You are a success. You're good looking. You're exactly the right weight. I mean, so the affirmation, I feel good when I do it, by the way. No trying to diminish it. But you see, while you're doing that, you're priming your brain into an experience of feeling more connected to yourself.
This is no different than the reclamation work, Andy.
No, of course not. I mean, that's what I'm going to say. There's thousands of roads to Rome. And I think it's always dangerous when anyone overly states their one role because they're like, hey, I've got the secret. No, there are just different ways to get there. And the fact that you've specialized on one tool is great because it serves, but there'd be 100 other tools. You'll notice when someone comes to me for work, I'll often send them to other people. And it's not because I can't also serve them, but a lot of times maybe they've resolved some issues in their life, which are the areas I might be able to help them. But the areas they haven't resolved are done with somebody who does maybe somatic work, body work or so on. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm curious. Bolalong says that he learned it from his father. But we don't know exactly what he was referring to. But he had
fixed mindset bunch.
He'd get triggered by that for sure. He does have a bit of a fixed mindset, though. A
little bit.
Yeah, because in some ways he's like on an island in the middle of South Africa with no one who understands him.
Oh, I like that they blocked him from WhatsApp group.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny. Oh,
because he points out.
Yeah, because the gardener came into the complex and someone wrote, "Hey, who was the black guy with the earring?" And he's like, "Hold on, why do we need to describe them that way?" As if the descriptors don't already say something about him. Yeah, you're not going to win that one, Bolalong, because you have to have a different perspective of how you can see the world.
Affirmations.
You got it as well. He's about 20 seconds behind us, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, that's what, and I see, the word priming is a word I've used a lot, and that's in order to prime a mindset. And I think about it a lot when I'm in space. So when I go into a physical space, I see it has an influence on me, and I really feel what it does to me. Do you have that? Do you have experience or not?
Give me an example.
So when I walk, there's the apartment I'm decorating right now down the road, and when I walked into the apartment, like I didn't feel any synergy. I felt dark wood in a space in the Netherlands, which is already dark. I saw nothing modern. So all of a sudden I was feeling the space and I felt, wow, this space is not triggering me in any way to feel light and open. And so I was sitting there looking and I thought, what am I going to do to this space? So what I realized was it was an intuitive way of looking at it, is that I took two massive mirrors and put them on the other side of the room. So all the light coming in the front windows could be seen in the back of the house as well. So it's like you've got windows in the front and the back just because you got massive mirrors reflecting them.
Which house is this?
This is in Nasokata.
Nice.
And my reason for this is it goes back to mindset, is that I've often felt in myself that when my view is obstructed, that I don't have the capacity to be as creative. So if I'm in a room downstairs, like I'm living downstairs in the building now, and I'm looking out the front door and there's literally 15 meters across a wall, I get very little sunlight. That has an immediate impact on my mindset. Nice. And so what I've begun to see is when I do a training or a coaching, I want to go to a space that's got open fields, an ocean, a lot of sunlight, because immediately what happens is the brain is being stimulated by this sort of the feeling like there's this, everything is possible, nothing's obstructing me, your whole brain and I feel that in my body all the time. So nice. when you create a training environment, I'm also very conscious of the necessity to prime and to create spaciousness, so the brain feels like it's got spaciousness. And that's at least been my experience, and I feel very connected to that. So I just feel that way.
Nice. Well, in a way, behind the scenes, when I started talking, I said to you, intention. So even my alarm, is a piece of piano music, which when I wake up, it's like, oh, it's not that like shocking sound. It's really like I wake up with soothing music.
Yeah.
So I just implemented things in my life, even food, which nourish.
Interesting. Because I'm just thinking of something totally that hits me as you speak.
Tell me what hits you, Andy Shalev. Andrew Raymond Shalev.
Or Andy Ray, that's my signature. I know you as someone who has the capacity to be depressed, also be depressed.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So that's something that you know of yourself. And then what I see is you say, okay, I am not going to let that take me over. And in order to do that, I have to prime myself with certain things so that I stay in a certain mindset.
Yeah.
And that staying in that mindset would mean I wake up to methodical, this music that grounds me. It gets me into the day, but I don't feel tension or anxiety. Mm-hmm. You don't watch stupid news shows that take you away and get you full of anxiety. So you've created a space where your mindset is very much sort of nurtured through rituals and through practices you do throughout the day.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I said I've associated with you discipline in your mindset. That's why for me, I don't know where I'm. Oh, shit, I always do that.
You're like moving away.
I know. I just want to get away from the cut off woman's head behind us. For me, my mindset is less about discipline and more about momentary, like things that I've almost primed myself so much in the past that when they show up today or at this moment, I'm prepared, because it's almost like my brain has has been waiting for this moment until it occurs. For example, what I meant with good or bad people. I would have said for years, my dad was a total jerk. He was evil. I wish I could kill him. If he died, I wouldn't care. All of that storytelling that was connected to the idea that there's bad people.
Yeah.
So once the idea left me that there's bad people, can you imagine how weird life becomes when there's someone that yells at you and you don't see them? You you just don't see them. You're like, oh, wow, that person's really suffering. Like that's the natural inclination. So my mind has already been set to react or to react in certain ways.
So when I hear you speak again, over the years of working together, you have helped me prime my brain in the same respect. Like when anger comes up, there's no shock or judgment. It's like, oh, there's pain.
Yeah.
And the same goes for, So wonderful.
And that's when
you actually gave me contrast.
Yeah. And you need to be around somebody usually that's consistent. For me, because if they're consistent, you can model their behavior. If they're sporadic and they act differently over time, it's really hard to model their behavior because there's not like what's the thing they're doing, and then they don't even know necessarily what they're doing.
So in a way, guys, if you watch all 144 shows, it will be like spending 1 hour a day with Andy, 144 hours.
Yeah, you should tell them the ones that actually are any benefit, because you're the one who's spent the most time with me doing this stuff.
If you think about it, in all the shows, you're very consistent.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like even when you're shitty.
Yeah,
like,
is that right?
Even when you had hay fever or whatever, it's like.
Yeah, I wanted to get to go back to the subject of when you were priming your brain in a way to behave a certain way, which is what we dealt with on a show that was a little bit uncomfortable. Remember the show I'm talking about? And I'm curious if it jumps out at you immediately or not. It was the one we did with manipulation versus influence. And my point was no different than mindset. Now we can go back to it. And if you watch that show your mindset puts you in a state where you're actually manipulating people, right? We use the word manipulating strongly when you're not at peace with the idea that there's also possibility of some manipulation.
Yeah.
When I was dealing with and saying, no, there's a way of looking at it where that doesn't exist, then it was hard at first when we were interacting. You're like, no, Andy, it wasn't like you were strong, but you were also, holding on to that viewpoint.
And there wasn't any space for what you were sharing to be there.
To be there. And like everyone who ever watches a show, everything is correct. So you were correct in saying that existed. And I was also correct. Because our context that we decide defines what's correct. So it's never, we always get to decide what's correct. But the thing that I was worried on that show was that you weren't feeling the mindset, and therefore you weren't able to practice it when we were, say, not together. And that was why I said that was a mentoring show, because it was me saying, Bambos, you are right. But you're missing the point of, if that's the mindset, what's the consequence when you're on a phone or when you're interacting? Yeah.
I rewatched that show specifically, and it wasn't comfortable because I could see the resistance in me.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was like watching myself resist was very uncomfortable. Like it's a show that I'm like, fucking delete it. But
really, because I would have thought on my side, delete it, because I go, God, people are gonna watch it and think that what an asshole Andy is. I'm like, no, I have to do this.
And in a way, I get it also from your end. And in a way, it was maybe not for the viewers, but for me, it was one of the most meaningful shows.
Yeah, and I'm also conscious is that's when we bring the mentoring on air. And I've had people comment to it. There's no one that does a mentoring show on air usually. They'll do sort of but like the mentoring show, because there is there's vulnerability in it. Because as a mentor, you're not trying to necessarily be the feminine energy. There's some of the masculine. There's there's consequence. There's the harder, the more disciplined teacher voice. Yeah. For me, we've done a lot of shows on mindset. We've just called it different things.
Yeah.
The shows on gratitude would have often been about mindset for me. There's shows we've done on, What other shows? You know the names? I don't have them. If I looked at the list, I'd almost go through them and say management versus leadership was Mindset.
Yeah, but not only our shows, but also in general, when we've spoken to Mr. Squid or Peter Koenig, Squib, Peter Koenig, or like self-made people.
Yeah.
There's always been a mindset that I've seen you speak to.
Yeah.
Surrender
was also Mindset. Yeah, I would, as we speak, I would then say, if we were like going to write a book, then the book would be something like The 5 Keys to Making Peace with Your Life.
You would actually call it 5 keys?
I don't know. That's what people do. They use 5 because it's a nice number. And then they're keys. You can't say 4 keys because 5 is like is an odd number. It's more curious.
But do we also agree that if you would write a book with 5 keys, you would also have to specify that these keys work depending on which context you're in? Or
I mean, the interesting thing about any book which has principles, right? Because when you write 5 keys, you're really saying these are the 5 principles, but we've used different language because it's more commercially more interesting. So by putting a principle in the world, then some authors will allow the other, so the reader, to decide the context that does or doesn't work for them. The hardest thing about writing, I find, when you're a teacher, is that there's only so much you can do to help the other person implement it. Because if you're doing a video like we're doing, or you've written a book, then basically you're telling someone one direction what they can or should or would be best doing to succeed. And what it misses out on is the 1,000 reasons why it wouldn't necessarily work in that person's life. But the thing I always find is the scary liability is that other person may not be able to see that, and then they judge themselves for not being able to implement it the way the book said how simple it is. And that's why I'm always cautious when I do and work on my own, is I'll always share my story and the vulnerability in it, because I want people to see that everyone's journey is just as valuable and has just as many lessons. If the greatest thing people would say after reading the books is that, yeah, I saw myself in your writing. Like, yeah, because in a way we're all very similar. And then some people do better marketing or self-promotion, and then we see them as special.
Yeah.
Or we get a picture in front of a Ferrari that isn't ours, and then just like look like, I haven't done a good picture like the.
Do you want one?
No. God. Maybe I would do that just as a gimmick, like everything I'm not photo shooting. The one thing we should probably show at some point on the show is the photo you took of me half naked on the table with
oh, wow.
Bambos shot a picture of me once that's just...
Well, it was you and your two...
It was 2 business colleagues.
Yeah.
Who I said, Bambos, I'll do anything you want me to. And you said, Andy, take your pants off. So I took my pants off. And you said, get on this table.
Wait, did you take off everything?
Or
just your pants?
I think I left my underwear on.
Underwear and socks you left on.
I think underwear and socks. And then the 2 business colleagues looked at me afterwards and said, wow, I've gained a whole new level of respect for you. Because I think on one level they thought to themselves, there's no way that they would have ever done that.
And funny enough, one of them is working in this mindfulness environment, like the surrender, and couldn't touch that part of themselves. But
there's a part of that, and I understand it, because I absurd. Also is that by showing or being that crazy, you potentially undermine yourself, because people now might not see you as special, right? What you curate. We curate our image to the world.
Yeah.
And if you show yourself in lights that don't validate the ideas people have of you, they might even get resentful of you, because you're not holding true to whatever it is, whatever it is they think you should be, right? Yeah.
Can you ever control that though?
Yeah, you can.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, control would be a strong word. I would say influence it for sure.
Yeah, influence, but you can never ultimately have everyone seeing you in a certain.
I mean, light. It was the same thing with, when you had the big earrings in your ears.
Yeah.
How do you feel when I bring that up?
Oh, like I dress like I don't care, and
oh no, but I just don't know. I was like
big piercings in my ears,
and then I told you that phrase that I heard.
The bigger
the bigger the gauge, the bigger the gauge, the lower the wage.
So, but the funny thing is, the moment I took out my earrings, business really took off.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that thing was that Ronnie said, I have a hard time.
David.
What do you mean?
Was it David or Ronnie?
David did. David told me the gauge thing, but Ronnie said to me, I would have a hard time bringing you forward in the business context because I would need to have some level of feeling like, okay, he's representing the stability of whatever they think is right in financial services.
Yeah.
So that was doing it. But, a lot of people say, oh, that's not authentic. That's, I got it. And yet you got a lot of work because you adapted. I like what Bolalang has written on the screen. I don't know what it was in phrase to, but he's saying, meaning we're all fakes.
Oh, that, for example, when we talked about your photo.
Yeah, I would have to say that I'd like to phrase it differently. We all project things onto one another. So we project onto one another, and we are not aware that we project onto one another. So I project onto Bolalang that he's this really nice, sweet guy who is not, although he seems to be tolerant, in some ways he's very intolerant. He's intolerant against what he thinks to be is intolerance. So he's intolerant around intolerance. And so, and that projection on Bolalang, that might be totally wrong. And then one day he might say to me, Andy, what do you mean? Or whatever, and just give me he might be the biggest racist we've ever met, right? Who knows? I don't know. But the thing is that the projection, as long as that projection gets reaffirmed, I create an image of who he is. And then anything that comes that doesn't validate that confuses me. Because in some ways, I now need him to be a certain way to hold the rest of the picture I have in congruent.
Is that what he was speaking to, though?
What do you mean?
We are all fakes.
Well, what I'm saying is that so if we're aware of that image of ourselves, then we can curate it a little bit.
Yeah.
So we can nurture it. You and I do a show every day. I dress up for the show, quite honestly, in my best clothes to make sure that the audience has a very good impression of me. You do the same, whatever it is. So we present to the world an idea of who we are. Intentionally or unintentionally. It's not necessarily that we're doing it. It just happens.
Is this dressing up really well?
No, this is sarcasm, Bambos. I like that you think that this might be my idea of good dressing. No, sarcasm. But that's the idea, is that people want to see certain things in certain people. People want to see, for instance, Trump supporters as racist, bigots, misogynist. Like, they want to see that. Like they have to see it that way, because if they don't see it that way, it doesn't validate their idea that this is a horrible place or horrible people. So to see that they're really good people that maybe just have policy differences is really hard for them to stomach.
So you're saying mindset is also a way of how we present ourselves? Like, I feel a bit confused.
I think I was responding to something else you said, and I don't want to, if I was to connect the two right now, what I would say is that mindset is what we see from the other person, which tells us, which is what we create as a story about them. So because of my mindset and how I've lived and how we've interacted, you have a certain ideas of who and what I am. You've learned from that.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe you haven't, who knows? But that would be I think if we looked up the word growth mindset, we'd probably have a very clear definition of it. And then you'd say, oh yeah, that's what someone who's always open to learning and evolving and growing and expanding looks like. I would say you have a growth mindset. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Would you say I have a growth mindset?
I've never experienced you not being open to an idea.
Yeah. But weirdly, I asked the question, who do you think has more of a growth mindset, you or I?
Me.
Yeah. And why would you say that?
Intuition. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Intuition.
Well, if I was to give it words, it would be because you're looking outside of yourself for things that can also support you in your development inside of yourself. Not bad nor good. It is a mindset which says there's things to learn and grow and expand. And in a lot of ways, I've already said, you know what? I'm happy with just being present with what is. So in a way, I don't have as much of a growth mindset because I'm not really inviting it. Not that when it doesn't come in, I also don't go into it, right? I was going to do this course with Catherine Franken for a few months with breath work.
Yeah.
And I saw, breath work is something that I could use to ground and to feel more connected and that. So it's not that I don't, but it's not like you're very open and looking to challenge yourself. And I think that's really great. Yeah.
Is that it?
I mean, I see 20 things I could talk about. I always like to let you come into some thoughts or ideas that might intrigue you.
I actually feel completely empty on this subject.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
Let's go into some of the mindsets that I see. I've mentioned one mindset that I see defines a person very clearly is if they think there's good and bad people.
Yeah.
The other mindset that I see is very much defining how one experiences the world is problem and opportunity. So
when they see a problem, instead of getting triggered, it's more like, oh, I can make something from this, or create.
Well, I would say COVID happened. And when COVID happened, several people said, oh my God, this is terrible. What am I going to do? Other people said, wow, this is changing everything. What am I going to do? And
nice.
The framing of those two worlds creates an entirely different experience. So a lot of the people I was coaching at that time, which was quite interesting, was around their mindset. And I remember one specific situation was one client was struggling because they felt fear. And I laughed and said to them, hey, listen, this is exactly the moment when everyone's feeling fear, when the greatest opportunities happen. So I want you to think about where are the things that you could take advantage of at this moment. And she's like, wow, well, there's this building that they have near to us that I've been thinking about acquiring, but now that this has happened, maybe they'd accept a lower price. So she went from the mindset of, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm scared, to, wow, maybe this is a great chance to capitalize on this moment. And so she bought that house. She just bought it, I think 2 or 3 weeks later. And then what happens is things settle down, things restructure. She bought the house, and a week later, someone said to her, I want that house. You don't need to do anything to it, and I'll just give you $100,000 more than what you bought it for. And so the whole feeling is like, that is often when people say, wow, my mindset is, how do I take advantage of whatever's going on? And I don't know what that looks like yet. That's a very different picture than, oh my God, what am I going to do? And this isn't attached to money per se, right? But this is attached to, there's a guy I met, I like COVID, if that's okay. There's a guy I met who was starting an advertising agency before COVID. And so we met and we talked, and then the advertising agency, when COVID hit, just was not worth anything, because who's going to advertise when there's nothing to sell? And then 2 weeks later, he's interacting with all the Chinese manufacturers for PPE, and he's now becomes one of the largest distributors for medical support materials in the Netherlands.
Wow.
So that was him saying, oh, my mindset is opportunity. What's the opportunity here? Where can I capitalize on it? Bang. And then he just executed on it immediately. He's Persian, and the Persians tend to be very good in those things. That's my experience has been. Yeah. So yeah, that's that challenge, problem or challenge. I do see that's another mindset thing that we're talking about that really is, if it frames how you see things, right? Bowl along, I want to make sure we don't go too far away from the comment, because then I won't remember what he responded to.
Oh, it was when we were talking who has more a growth.
Okay, so when I said who has more of a growth mentality or mindset, Bowl along said that is a trick question, because a person who's already grown has very little to show that they have a growth mindset. And is he saying that is projecting that I've grown, therefore I don't show that I have a growth mindset? What is that? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, when I look at you, it's more that you're at peace with where you are.
Yeah.
You don't need to add anything else to your life.
Yeah.
And when things arise, it's more like in flow. Like it was more like ding.
Oh yeah, and I'll do that now because it's interesting and curious, but not because I need to, or yeah. I mean, the whole journey with psychedelics has been something that's a little bit of the area where I'm stretching myself a bit more. Like, what would I experiment with to see how that shapes my way of seeing things?
We find some psychedelics and do a show. This is what it looks like, guys.
They have. I walked into a shop in Amsterdam, which I've almost never been in these shops before, so I know very little of these shops. They're everywhere, of course.
Smart shops.
Yeah.
Which one?
It was the one on the not Kalverstraat. It's on what's the big street that goes to
Nieuwendijk.
Where? Nieuwendijk. Is that where the tram goes down the center of the road?
Kamrak?
No. It's further away. No.
It's a tram street.
It's a tram street.
In front of the Dam Square.
Not in front of the Dam Square. It's in front of where Apple Store goes.
Leidseplein.
Leidseplein, yeah. Leidsestraat. And on Leidsestraat, there's a really kind of upscale looking smart shop. Why they call them smart shops, I'm also curious. Do you know why they call them smart shops?
Because you get smart when you go in.
I don't know. Just so
smart drugs.
But they call them smart shops. But the funny thing is, where you buy marijuana, it's a coffee shop, but where you buy
magic mushrooms, peyote.
But you can't buy magic mushrooms, can you?
I don't take this stuff. back in the days, yes.
Okay. Well, now.
So I think like my mind says smart shops are smart alternative to drugs.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Like they're not harmful.
Okay. Well, I went into one about 2 weeks ago, and I like how it works. I say to Ronnie, hey, I want to go inside. And then Ronnie says, okay, I'll wait for you on the other side of the street. So I go in to ask because I want to find out. And then I'm looking in the window, and they don't sell mushrooms anymore, which I didn't think they did, because someone in the city took mushrooms and they jumped off a building years ago. And after that happened, they said no more mushrooms in the city. And then what they do sell, though, which is quite interesting, is they sell truffles.
Which is a kind of mushroom.
But legally, it's not the same. So, but they sell these truffles, and I didn't realize that truffles, they have a different consistency than mushrooms. So they sell you this container that's that big, and you need to eat the whole container to have the experience of what's that size, a small size of a mushroom. So they sell them, and interestingly, each experience had a name to it. So there was like 6 different names, and yeah, I was curious and asked the guy, and he explained them all to me. Very nice guy. It was like $30 for a trip, I think, was the money that it cost.
And
I didn't buy it. I kind of I look at those events as almost ceremonial. Like, I don't look at them as arbitrary. It's not like I say, oh, I'm going to do this. It's more like when I did the the 5-MeO DMT experience, it was a ceremony for me, which brought the last letter to a conclusion. It never felt like I ended the last letter. It just was. It never had a moment. I was alone for 3 months. I wrote the book, but I never felt like this is like a tail end to it. Like there's been a kind of just like a ceremonial moment of, yes, this has happened. And that felt like that was a reason to do it. So I feel like if there were things in my life that I had meaning associated with, or things that I felt like I wanted to necessarily make peace with, that feels like I'm more interested in those for that reason. That's where I see myself get excited, or where I feel like it, the flow that we talk about.
Yeah. However,
Bolalong. Make sure we have to say Bolalong's name so that people listening afterwards will know.
Bolalong. However, there was a lot of work that went in before we knew you. You changed before we witnessed you.
Yeah. If you had met me during the time of Case,
20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago, certainly then, Bolalong, you certainly would not have liked me. That's clear. You would have just thought, oh my God, this guy's so self-absorbed.
I mean, when I first met Andy, he was a dick.
Was I?
Yeah. We sat in this building, actually, downstairs when it was being renovated.
Okay.
And you said to me, so what's the name of your business? And I'm like, I'm mass photographer. He's like, you said, what kind of shit is that?
I didn't know. I didn't say that. I said that you were masked. I don't think you remember that. And I thought it was strange for somebody who was hiding themselves to call themselves unmasked.
Yeah.
And then I believe at that moment you looked at me like, you motherfucker. I know you're right, but everyone else didn't see it. So it worked for everybody else. But if someone sees through me, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I think that's where that was the first time I saw you, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was no game in that. I mean, you were, in a way, when we first met years ago, you were very much thinking that being authentic was better.
Yeah. I had an idea of good and bad.
Yeah, you had an idea of good and bad. And I think in a way, when I experienced you then, I also experienced you not just being at peace with being, because you still had this idea. And that's where I said, that's where I didn't feel the vulnerability behind the person who thought that we should always be more emotional, I guess. Yeah. But you responded quite like open at that moment. Why did you respond open?
I guess I could feel where you were coming from.
Okay. But I know you well enough to know if other people said that to you, you certainly would have said, screw you.
Because I can normally feel where they're coming from.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah, because I was kind of surprised that when I said it, it's almost like you caught me. That's how I felt. Like that. I remember the moment. It's like you caught me, and now I've been caught with my hand in the cookie jar. What do I do now? That was the feeling I had at that time. Yeah. It kind of goes back to the Bolalong's prior comment when he said, we are all fakes. And in a way, I think if we don't necessarily call ourselves fakes, but we see that there's this thing that everyone projects onto us that isn't really true, then all of a sudden we make peace with ourselves. But if we try to maintain an image or unconsciously believe something about ourselves that we want to support, that we can call that a belief, then we get stuck. So in a way, feeling the freedom to say, yeah, I'm a fake, then of course you're free again. Yeah. But that's not easy, of course, because that goes to identity. And we have, although we talk somewhat around identity, I've always had a hard time bringing identity onto the show, because I see it's the kind of thing that to talk about it's so abstract.
It becomes a concept.
It becomes a concept.
Yeah.
True. And then it
will be the same as talk about enlightenment, right?
Yeah. I see maybe it different for me in a way, I guess. Enlightenment is the idea of projecting onto somebody else. And that, of course, unless you're projecting onto yourself, but let's assume for a moment, enlightenment is I project onto someone else. I see identity as how can I see the thing I don't see in myself? How can I see everything I take for granted as normal, as the way things should be? That, like, how can I deconstruct that and not go insane? And that's why it's so hard to, we have a show coming up on somebody who had schizophrenia, and they came out of it. And I've often seen people that go into psychiatric wards or have these experiences where they lose every sense of reality, that those are experiences that are of enlightenment, but we treat them as if they need psychiatric support. But in so many ways, that would be the thing I'd say is like, yeah, I just saw a comment come in and I lost my thought, which I like this comment. Charles Davies, who we both know, British. He has reasonably good teeth for a British person.
My definition of identity is the sum of the ideas you hold on to.
I like that one. I wonder if it would be an addition to that about myself, or if that matters to him at all. So my definition of identity is the sum of ideas I hold about myself. Now, I guess he's going up to almost a level if I take my context and his context, his level of context makes everything. It puts everything into oblivion. There's some ideas that you hold on to, where my idea only puts me out into oblivion.
I love it.
So he's in his.
And he does have a cheeky face, doesn't he?
He has a cheeky face. Of course he does. Yes. I think we'll get him on the show at some point in time. He's probably seen 2 or 3 episodes and realizes that he's only going to mess around for an hour or so with us. So, Bambos, that was your show on mindset. How'd you feel about it? Will you rewatch this show?
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
Because
sometimes I need to rewatch it, but I think this is a good show, and I think the edited version. There were quite a few quotes that you expressed.
I like that when you said, I told you we had an open show, and you said, yeah, let's just you and I do it on mindset. I thought about it this morning. I thought I didn't know what we would talk about, quite honestly. And then I had to write four like general areas where I thought, oh, these are areas that I consider when I think of mindset. And so I was happy that I gave the show a little bit more prep than I would normally, because I think definitions of words can create a lot of confusion. On one of the prior shows, I used a word when we did manipulation versus influence. I said that in manipulation, I associated more with ill intent. That was my association, just because I decided arbitrarily to make that distinction.
Yeah.
And I realized somebody else who watched the show later said, actually, if manipulation is done with the intent of support, then you wouldn't necessarily think of it as being bad, right? In that sense of it's trying to influence the person, and we use the word manipulation, and then but it's not bad. And I think that's what then I would sort of I realized I would have redefined probably how I explained it then. Nice. Because in a way I'm like, why would you? I just arbitrarily set a definition, but that's what I mean in life is we do arbitrarily set definitions, and then maybe somebody else says, why would you do that? And in that case, I realized that there was no need to make manipulation associated with more of a negative thing. So, yeah.
And the last comment of the day from Bullang.
As usual, let's see what he has to say.
I think. Go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, please.
Please.
No, please.
I'm done.
No, you.
Now, Raymond.
I think most disagreements come from how we understand language. It's not standard.
Yeah, I mean, we've had several times where we had a guest on, and like Simon Squibb.
Simon Squibb, I remember it.
And you were both speaking to the same thing, but he couldn't see that you were agreeing with him. And he was trying to make a point over and over again.
Yeah, that's when
he needed you to use his words.
Yeah. And instead of saying, oh, we all have different ways of pointing at the same thing, or we might have a nuance that's a little bit different. Yeah. Cool.
We've come to the end of our hour, Mr. Shalif.
It's time to go. The final curtain.
Do we want to announce the...
No. We have a week. That's all we're going to let you know. We've got 1 week before we're taking a hiatus. 1 week of shows. 5 days with us to enjoy our company. And then I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again on
A Wonderful
Chaos.